able to join us live. So I wanted to start off by handing over to Michael, who's going to talk us through some of the Google extensions and perhaps other tools that he may be using during his workflow, and I'm hoping to learn a lot here. And then in the second part of the session, I'm going to kind of briefly talk to you about my experience and my work, because I think the more we know about what each other does and the more we can support each other, potentially refer business to each other, then wouldn't that be great? So over to you, Michael, to start, and we can see your screen successfully.
Okay. Okay. So yeah, I'll try and get rid of the. Okay. I mean, in essence, it's about kind of using extensions in such a way to try and make looking at websites a little bit easier and a little bit kind of like more sympathetic to sort of, I suppose, speedy processing. I mean, I find that the majority of the stuff which I'm kind of managing and doing myself is tends to be like a list of URL addresses to go and so we, you know, the monitoring tends to get done and you get sent a list and then you go through it and then you create that kind of, you know, be it I don't know, an Access database or an Excel or something like that. But if you like, you're interrogating, but there's so much of that which is boring and procedural and really rather monotonous, and you know, the spotting of things like keywords and brand names is, and I was kind of like, and I'm going to talk about, I'll talk about three very quick extensions which I kind of use not so much on a daily basis but relatively frequently, and why I use them, and then kind of like step onto another group of extensions which I suddenly thought, well, these look really, really good, and they could really kind of like add another level to, particularly to sentiment, as almost like a double check. However, in my realization, that kind of like opened a bit of a can of worms. But anyway, I'll just start off with the ones which work anyway. And I presume most of you probably use Grammarly anyway, which is an extension on Chrome. Quite good, gives you kind of like suggestions, will spot for you know, your and you can set it to different sort of forms of language, as far as, you know, American English or I don't know how good it is with other European languages, but it's a pretty kind of like safe bet. And even in the, you know, I've never paid for the version, so I don't know what that one is like, but it seems to me like, because you know, we all do typos and I probably do more than my fair share, and it's just useful as a backup. Another one, which is when putting reports together, particularly first time out, if people want to, or if a client wants you to kind of like adopt a certain kind of color scheme to use, to follow their, you know, style guide or something like that. And if you want to kind of spot for what those colors are, you can kind of work out that, say, you know, you get a company like, say, EE, you want to spot for what the particular type of green might be. It will, you can do a thing called Colorzilla. If you need to know any of these, I'm very happy. Obviously, I can send you the links to them and all that kind of thing. But if you did a search under the in the extension manager, or in the extension search, which I think is sort of like if you go somewhere along the lines of extensions, it takes you to kind of like a shop where you can kind of like put in these, you know, keywords, and it will do a search for you and find things. But if you put Colorzilla in or something like that, it will come up, and it gives, I don't know if you can see this as far as spotting for colors. It actually tells you, you know, what the RGB code is. So if you're going into Excel to use some colors in a graphs or something like that, you can kind of choose on that green, and you can get shaded up and down on that to keep it in line with you know, whatever the appearance might be. Those are both which kind of like, I tend to run in the background, but I don't use them. I certainly don't visit them, you know, more than maybe once or twice a week or something like that. But one I do use fairly religiously is one called Multi-Highlighter, which again, you can find via the same thing where you add it on. I've set it up here with like a load of brand names. This is in the insurance industry, and also I set it up with some keywords which I know the client is interested in, different areas, different sort of message points, and things which I know that they want me to track. So, or we can set that up, and if you're having that running in the background, so basically you can just copy and paste in a series of text into there, and it will, all subsequent pages which are attached to the same browser, as it comes up, it highlights the words for you. I mean, it always uses the same color scheme, so all the Avivas turn up as red. I don't know, Zurich turns up as yellow. It's fairly indestructible from the point of view. It's never proved to miss stuff. In my experience, I always tend to find it fairly reliable, but it doesn't do expressions. It doesn't do like a series of words. If you said, you had a longish kind of keyword you were looking out for, like I don't know, environmental, social government, societal governance, or something like that, it would come up with each of those words as separate words. So it's not very good at whole expressions. It will just do single words on their own.
Michael, yeah. Jesper and Stefan both have their hand up, so I think they may have questions. Can we interrupt?
Pictures are quite small, sorry. Yeah.
Who goes first? Jesper, you go first.
Okay, just a quick question about Grammarly, because I've seen like multiple YouTube ads for it and I've never used it. I find that for some reason I use Chrome and I use like different Microsoft Office products. Yeah. And constantly the built-in spell check in Chrome conflicts with the built-in spell check in Microsoft products, which is really annoying, because I can't write an email in Danish without the English spell check taking over and so on. So do you know, can you say anything about whether Grammarly sort of will Grammarly sort of whisk away everything that's basic Chrome spell check and basic Microsoft spell check, and just, will that be the one that will dominate my screen, or will I just have a third spell check that will conflict with the other two?
I mean, I'm just looking at it here. The options which are available are pretty much English only. Different versions of. Because call it, I'm lucky enough or whatever, but I haven't kind of like bumped into foreign language issues with it.
Okay. Great.
But I don't habitually use foreign language, and I certainly don't type it unless it's kind of like probably generated using Google Translate or something awful like that,
Got it.
So I can't help you out with. I can understand that there would be a conflict, because of course I presume you set your Microsoft thing to allow you to be in Danish.
Yeah.
And which I'm sure works absolutely wonderfully. And then of course the Grammarly one only wants to do English, and so it kind of throws everything out.
Yeah, my problem arises when I set Danish as my default language in for instance my mail browser, my mail Microsoft solution, and then I open it in a Chrome browser, and Chrome says no, this all has to be in English, and then everything. Yeah,
it all goes wrong.
Yeah. Second question, and it's brief. Are these extensions for Chrome something you pay for, or is it simply just sort of like something you install?
No, these are all free.
Okay, great. Yeah. All right. Thank you.
So maybe a few words on Grammarly, because I'm a heavy user of it, and I even subscribe to it to the
you know more than I do then.
Paid service. Because most of the material that we produce is in English, and obviously as a German company with German juniors, you want to give your team members something to work with, so that they feel more confident. So my impression is that I mean, some of my team members have stopped using it because sometimes it recommends odd things, especially when it suggests you to use other terms for the same word. So what's it called? Synonyms. that doesn't really work very well. It is, I think it's good in things like commerce and grammar to a certain extent. So I usually, I don't set the commas in the right way when I use EG or so, and it usually finds that. My feeling is that I still have this routine to check emails through Grammarly, but you have to basically copy paste the stuff into Grammarly, and then it will check it for you. At least on a Mac, there's no Grammarly doesn't do it for you. It's sometimes it's built in, but you always have to activate it to get it running. So that's thing, and I figured out that recently when I want to write, I think Grammarly is very nice when I'm writing LinkedIn posts, because usually I write them directly in the browser, and there's no spell check there. So Grammarly saved me from some embarrassing mistakes, I think, in the past. So but for that you don't need the paid service. I think the free version is already very good. And for other things, when it's getting tricky, I started to use DeepL more than Grammarly, actually, and then I write stuff in my natural language, so in German, and I'm very impressed how good this translation tool has gotten, because my English is fairly well, I think, so I know when a translation is correct or not. And sometimes DeepL surprises me with very sophisticated ways of how it translated things, and I was very satisfied with it. So instead of writing something in English directly and then checking it through Grammarly, I sometimes, especially when it's more complicated stuff that I want to write, I write it in German, and then I have it translated with DeepL, and then the grammar is already correct, obviously, so I don't need to spell check anymore. Obviously, you need to type it correctly in your natural language, otherwise DeepL doesn't work. So you might need a spell check in your
I'll have to check
mother
that one
tongue.
out.
Yeah. So that has gotten very, very great. And the mighty highlighter here, that's great. I love this tool. Quick question. It seems that it is erratic when it comes to languages, right? So I could use it
again,
for Chinese or so. You haven't tried?
Oh God, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I've never tried it on with sort of over. Luckily, I'm just doing it in English, so
yeah.
It seems to be fairly kind of bulletproof in that respect.
Yeah.
But what it's like with foreign languages, I really couldn't comment. I'm sorry.
But one would assume that so long as you've typed the phrase in the respective language correctly into that browser, it's a keyword highlighting tool. So one would assume that it would work.
Yeah, that's what I thought. That it just looks for. I mean, it doesn't interpret. It just looks for the same signs. I would assume, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
That's going to save me loads of time. Thank you for. I didn't know about this multi-highlighter.
Yeah.
I mean, it's nothing clever really. It's a very kind of procedural in a way, but it is a kind of has a sort of a nice kind of way to because you can also kind of like spot for messages and particular themes within stuff as well, and I tend to kind of like, I'll have a client which and on a notepad I'll keep all of their keywords hidden, stored away, and then each month you kind of come around and you look at the stuff and you kind of like reload that stuff onto the mighty highlighter, and then you just know that the messages and the themes are all kind of set up for you, and then you can kind of tinker around and add stuff and take stuff away as the sort of their interests change or whatever. But yeah, I mean, in looking at the extensions, I tend to kind of like this is where, if you like, the part of whatever I might tell you actually kind of like turns into a little bit of a work in progress, because I noticed on the extension shop, if you like, the Google extension shop, that there were a couple of tools which were providing sentiment analysis. And there's one called Sentiment Analyzer and another one called Semantria. I tried tinkering around with them, And if you can get them to work, then you're doing better than I couldn't. And the reviews of them were pretty terrible, saying that, you know, basically just didn't seem to operate. And they seem to be all about sort of at least 4 or 5 years old, which tends to be that unless they're updated relatively often, you tend to find that it's people who've done stuff, stuck it on there, and then just kind of forgotten about it, and then it's all stopped working because of updates and this, that, and the other. So then got to be thinking along the lines of, well, how difficult can it be to make an extension? And that kind of like sort of started a bit of a kind of like chain of thought, which took me in a number of different directions. You can actually make extensions relatively easily. Starts getting into Python, which is not my strongest suit, but you'd be surprised what you can do by chopping other people's code and, you know, looking at tutorials and all the rest of it. And I've done stuff before, which has kind of worked. But you obviously need a sentiment engine in the background to kind of operate the thing. And in playing around with a number of things, there is a sentiment checking tool which is available from AWS. Amazon Web Services do one, but to actually tinker around with it and to get to a point where you actually want to apply it, you actually had to buy units, if you like. There was like a 0 to 5,000 units notional thing which was available at a price. Admittedly not very much, but I tend to think, well, I really don't think that I'm gonna, this is a, you know, turning into a little bit of a kind of conceptual project. I'm gonna kind of just play around with and see what else is available. And I kind of ended up looking at a thing called Google Natural Language, which is available up to 5,000 queries per month you can get on a free thing. And a unit is a group of 1,000 characters. So, you know, within the realms of me having a play with whatever, that's absolutely fine. Because I'm not going to exceed that. If you're an industrial user, then, you know, you get into a more of a pay kind of scale, which goes up accordingly. But anyway, to actually get to that point, you're then downloading an API and you're punching in your credit card details and you're then applying it into your own tool. I haven't got that far yet. So I'm just playing around with it in its form like this. And again, I can share this, but if you just put in, you know, Google Natural Language, you will come up with a page a bit like this. And there's a bit here which allows you to actually demo it from a point of view of chucking in a bit of text. You can just chuck in a headline or something like that, and it will pull out a number of entities and then give you a thing called a salience score, which is a kind of velocity, how important that component is within the text score, which goes between 0 and 1. And then they will give you a sentiment score, which is between -1 and +1. Yeah. So, I mean, I kind of like did a thing this morning, which, this was a story which I culled out of a financial services magazine website, which was talking about HSBC. And I don't know if you can see this here. This is just a case of literally copy and pasting into there, and it comes up with, and it's starting to isolate the entities themselves. The blue will be organizations as they understand it. So you got, you know, Virgin Mobile, you got HSBC being mentioned because it was largely a story which was talking about victims of scams against HSBC. So this is firstly spotting the entities, and it isolates the entities out, gives you a salience score, and M is just referring to character M who was unnamed in court or named in court only as M. But then you got HSBC, and so it's starting to isolate what it understands these words to. Admittedly, this is quite a long bit of text, so there's a long load of rubbish here, which is worth ignoring. But at one of the tabs which I've got kind of into looking at is the one about obviously giving you an idea of sentiment. So it's basically taking each of the sentences and scoring them out, and then below it will then actually categorize the organization. It gives you a velocity score, a magnitude score, which is 1.5, which is getting on for pretty high, and a sentiment score in HSBC's, considering the topic, went under the headline of victims of a complex push scam repaid just 50% by HSBC, is not surprisingly pushing into the minus, pushing into the negative. I've never seen it score massively low. I've never seen it score often an organisation really below minus 0.1 or 0.2, which is kind of interesting. A lot of the time it's just coming up with a sort of a neutral 0 score. So it'd be nice to kind of like provoke it to come up with more negative, more nuance towards the negative or the positive. But I thought it was an interesting kind of
this is just it's a very useful resource, Michael, because oftentimes I'm asked to speak about, you know, humans versus machine, automated sentiment. And so I've gone and looked for tools that I can just plug my text in to see what the automated sentiment's like. But to do it on a Google one, I think has that size and breadth of Google behind it. So if it's wrong, we can criticize Google, and if it's right, we can
I'm the first person to say, you know, I'm the first person to stand up and say they're rubbish, you know, and 5 years ago they were. They're getting better. They're getting more understanding. This to me was quite an eye-opener, because it does actually take the specific entities and score them individually, rather than taking the whole thing in its entirety, which is what you used to get with, you know, the brand watches of this world. They would just give you like a sentiment score for the whole article and didn't actually tell you, you know, it might be talking about really positively about brand A, whereas brand B we're getting absolutely rubbished. But, you know, you just got that all over one single score. But this thing is actually kind of like taking it one step into, you know, actually taking out the point of view and actually giving a specific view on that specific, you know, entity in itself. So that was something which was a little bit above and beyond what I'd seen elsewhere. I'm not saying it's bulletproof, and I'm very, very happy to say that, you know, if you have a different experience, then you know.
Does it tell you? Does it tell you what the article is about? What topics are being mentioned?
It does various different things with, and I won't be prepared to talk about this in great detail.
Okay.
It starts getting a little bit kind of,
this is what all the developers do at the big agencies I work with. So it's fascinating to see how a lot of this is being done in the background.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the agencies I work with are probably using some of this technology in the background. But
it has a category score, which I must admit I hadn't looked at in great detail, but it has, for example, said with, you know, a better confidence than half, because I think the confidence score goes up to 1, so it's just over half confident that it is a law, government, public safety, crime and justice issue. So I mean that's a fairly broad, a long list of topic areas which, you know, are relevant, but you know, you can kind of like, and I quite like to. Because I mean, this is about as near to an enterprise kind of option available to, you know, us little developers in the background, you know, to have a good play with. And you know, you can kind of, I mean, I don't know how this compares to the you know, because there's a lot of really clever stuff going on with text analytics at the moment, but you know, I get the feeling this is you know, not far off what is, you know, the bleeding edge.
Well, that's fascinating. Thanks, Michael.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a kind of like it's a little bit of an untold story in a way, because I don't have a punchline. I don't have I don't have an end point really beyond. I'm looking at this when I can. I'm kind of using it to sort of play around with, if I get a query over a cutting and the client throws it back at me and says, well, we're kind of reading it as on the good side, but you kind of scored us badly on it, then I'm not saying I default to this and go, well, this is what Google says, but it is a kind of thing which is there in the background, if you can, a resource which you can kind of tap into. Yeah, I mean, I'd be interested basically if anybody else has got thoughts on it, because I see it as kind of the future, but at the same time, I want to try and make it work in my workflow better.
Jesper, I see you've got your hand up.
Sorry, Jesper.
No, that was a clapping icon. That was a...
Okay. Yeah. Do you know what I love is the fact that by sharing this with us, you've obviously spent the time with all of these things to go find them, and you've saved us a lot of time by, go find them for us. And this is the joy of us all coming together and perhaps sharing some of these sources that we use, because between us, we've got such a wealth of knowledge. We're probably all using completely different tools already, even just with that Colorzilla one. I have a thing where I love using the eyedropper feature in PowerPoint, but then you've got to do a screenshot, put it in PowerPoint, work the eyedropper out to get the hex codes or the RGB codes, whereas that is already going to save me a whole load of steps. So for all of these things, and that multi-highlighter can be really useful for many of my teams. So thank you so much for sharing that. It's brilliant.
I'm kind of hoping that one of you is going to go, oh, well, I've tried the Google Natural Language, and instead I've used so-and-so because I find it a bit clunky, and I go, oh, brilliant, and I get my notepad and I start scribbling frantically, because, it's a bit of a kind of like a quickly moving area, a quickly developing area.
I think you've done a lot of the groundwork for us, and some of us will choose to go follow that up, and we can perhaps come back together at future times to say, well, where did this take us? For sure. So no, I've had.
Well, I mean, if you want to play around with it and come back with any thoughts, I would love nothing more than to hear. It would be really it'd be interesting to know how other people's take on these things.
And that's another kind of direction I'd love to take this forum in. And I don't know whether we should actually keep, I mean, some of this information we've shared here is something that could be really usefully shared outside of this AMEC individual community. I can see a lot of potential AMEC clients finding value in it, a lot of PR agencies finding value in some of these tools as well. So it's interesting that we're choosing to keep this recording in a closed shop format, but perhaps there are some information contained which we could perhaps develop some, more of a voice for us as a group within AMEC, perhaps blogging and sharing externally and using it as a opportunity through AMEC and through its website to market our own services and expertise. Jesper, I see you got your finger up.
Yeah, now it was sort of, yeah. No, I was just going to say, I like the idea, of course, of sharing knowledge and sharing tools, and I don't particularly mind sharing with someone outside of AMEC, but I know that in some of the other special interest groups right now, there's a discussion going on, particularly in the agency group, about what is the value proposition of AMEC, meaning what do you get as a member that you don't get for free on the website. And I think we just need to sort of maybe put our ear to the ground and align a little bit with what are the other interest groups doing and what does AMEC as an institution want to do in the future. Because we are sort of, at least from my perspective, personal perspective, we are a little bit running out of arguments why people should join AMEC, because we are basically giving away so much for free. We're developing tools, we're developing platforms, we're developing like the measurement maturity mapper and the interactive evaluation framework. We got all these case studies in the case study bank. You can really get loads and loads and loads, which is fine as long as we're sort of, just spreading the word and spreading enthusiasm. But at some point, I've had agencies come up to me and say, we don't really see the point of membership because we can get everything for free. So there's the counter argument that something should be, you know, behind some sort of a
behind closed
paywall.
doors. Yeah, understood. And I think that this is why perhaps having these opportunities for us as individuals to come together, sort of talk in a closed format, but behind these closed doors would be interesting. And sort of on a similar thing in relation to member benefits and so on, this whole kind of you know, whether we can grow the individual category as a group, because the potential is that there could be thousands of us individuals. I know we're quite a small group of people, but I strongly believe that there could be many of us, versus whether AMAC as an organisation wants to focus more on it, you know, corporate and enterprise level membership. So these are all discussions to be had, but love to chat to you all one-to-one as well about these things and how I can best present our case as individuals to the board as well. So thank you, Michael.
Just one sentence on that one, and I think you were absolutely right pointing out that we might be in the same area, but we're not competitors. And I believe even if we do the same thing, since we are individuals or very small with our teams, there's always an opportunity to collaborate, because sometimes I have a big pitch, and I know I can't do this with my resources, and I'm so happy if there are people that can help me out with something like this. That's something that doesn't happen with the big agencies. You will not find like one of the big agencies collaborating with another one just because, you know, very rarely. And this is also what I see when I go to AMAC summits or so, that there is a certain level of presentation, but it's rarely something where you can really, you know, learn something, you know, specific. You know, you get inspired, but you don't learn how to do stuff. And I think that's maybe an opportunity that we can do here, to really say, because I'm you know, I can only echo what Jesper said. I don't mind sharing, because if I share, then it might trigger something with you, and you might say, hey, but I would do that in a different way. And then, you know, maybe that even improves what I'm doing and how I'm doing it, or makes it more efficient. So I can only echo that maybe we should even focus a little bit on ourselves and don't get involved into this whole big agency politics game there that's sometimes being played. But yes, I also feel that the more individuals we get on board, the more chances we have to collaborate, and it doesn't need to, right, it doesn't need to be a lot, right? I hope you didn't spend too much time, Michael, to prepare this. Sometimes it's fine just showing what you do on a regular basis without any preparation, right?
And I'm also open, and again, let's discuss this here, but between us all, we are all individually paying premium membership for some tools that, a bit like our car, it sits out there not being used most of the time, and so we're only getting value out of it 2% of the time. And perhaps between us together, if we feel like we can benefit from each other's collaboration, is potentially, you know, and I know we shouldn't have this on recording, but anyhow, you know, there are some things that can be shared unofficially and not shared unofficially and so on. And between us, maybe we should have a secret list of tech stack premium tools that we've all got availability, and are we prepared to share? Because I think then it's so hard for us as individuals to make the case for that investment for some of these tools. But this past year, I have finally begun to actually pay for some things, and it's benefiting my organisation. But between us, wouldn't that be interesting to see what complementary tools we could perhaps benefit from, and be prepared to say, yeah, I'll do you an export from there if you do me an export from there, and I'll share my login then. So, okay, all right. Well, I'm feeling happy and warm from this session already. So this is how I intended it to be. So. Good stuff, Michael. We interrupted the end of your session? You got
I'm pretty much kind of like, anyway, and you said talk for 15 or 20 minutes, and it's kind of
here
like
we are. Yeah, I know.
I mean, one last, if I was to say one last thing, which is in the Google Natural Language good side, which I've discovered about it, is when it understands an entity, it does actually look at the acronyms as well, and it kind of like melds them together. Like I do some stuff with financial services regulators, and there's a group called the Financial Conduct Authority, which gets abbreviated to the FCA, and it does actually join it together. It recognizes that the one is also the other, and so you don't get this thing where it's kind of like thinking, oh, it's two different organizations. So it's actually quite kind of intuitive in that respect. Is the final thing which I would say about it, which I've discovered. I just yet to actually find out how I can really use it in danger in the field, which is the API thing, which is the next step. Which probably won't happen for quite a while, because it seems to be quite complicated. So anyway, yes, that's better.
Okay. Brilliant. Shall I briefly, and I'm going to try and whiz through mine.
Shall I stop sharing?
Yeah, if you stop sharing, and then I'm going to start